Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think that books reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Revenant.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Future Redeemed, a game that was developed by Monolith Soft, published by Nintendo, and released in 2023 on the Nintendo Switch.
But first, if you give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
I realize that a lot of the time when I do that intro, I put on sort of a newscaster affectation. I turned it up to 14 on that one. I don't know why. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed is the final wave of the Season Pass DLC. This is a difficult thing to describe, but it's just sort of what games do now. But in terms of genre, is a RPG styled in the ways of an MMORPG, but single player. So just the combat system is similar. Mm-hmm. We've done episodes on Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3, so just go listen to how I describe it there.
Yeah, it's like arts palette based action combat, I guess.
Yeah, there is action involved, that is for sure. It is not a turn-based RPG, which has fake action, apparently. I don't know where my metaphor is going here. But yeah, this game, much like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, has, it's a primarily, combat-based open-world game. This is much more linear than the base game, which makes sense because this takes some hours to get through, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Whereas the original is a much larger, full-scale game, but with combat with 6 to 7 party members, a lot going on. You have the ability to switch between stuff, and there's a lot of sort of character customization things you do. And that is largely how the game's mechanical progression goes. But if you know Xenoblade, and I was thinking about this, I woke up in a cold sweat, and I was like, is Xenoblade Chronicles like my Kingdom Hearts, where I feel like I at some point hit that part where I was like, I am too invested in this thing that is clearly off the rails. I was thinking about it in terms of the story that this game tells, this being a DLC tries to bridge a bunch of the stuff that is only hinted at in the main game, and also brings in elements from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. And maybe X, I don't know, because I haven't played that one yet.
Not really.
Okay,
I was kind of hoping for that, but it didn't happen.
That would be dope. But yeah, and I was like, this is so much worse than what people think Kingdom Hearts is. I'm there's a part in the spoilers begin immediately as always. But there's a part in the DLC where I'm sitting at a kitchen table in the real fucking world. And they're talking about, the accidental game programmer guy, the architect who created the worlds of the Xenoblade games. Yeah, Klaus. And I'm like, this is insanity. And I like what they did with the story, and I like that insanity, but it is craziness in a way that I wasn't expecting I was expecting it, but I just didn't cognitively know that.
Yeah, as a big Xenoblade and Kingdom Hearts fan, I can say Kingdom Hearts is worse.
Okay, fair enough.
That. Yeah, I think it's they really, double down and put a nice bow on the self-referential story that they started in the base game in this. And I think it's that, going so, in on, the lore and backstory of, how these worlds were created and stuff, and, trying to bridge the gap between all the games is, what makes it seem a lot more complex. That it needs to be, I guess.
Your protagonist in this game is a guy named Matthew, and he is a dumb guy. Like, his primary character trait. Yeah, he's like a himbo. He's a real strong dude who wears too small of a shirt. And he rushes into stuff and is a big proponent of the, like, friendship and patience will pretty much get you through any problem lifestyle that he lives. And it didn't need to be. Like, obviously, like, you can do whatever. I like Matthew as a character. But there's a scene where he's not involved, and it's like Shulk and Rex having a conversation about what is happening, like, in the game at the moment. And I was like, I'm already the dumb guy, because what you're saying is not making any sense to me. Like, having him as an audience stand-in works for a lot of the stuff, but the game will not stoop to your level. It refuses to. It's just going to plow ahead and hope you get it.
That's actually really a good way to frame it, because that seems at least somewhat intentional to me. Because I feel like, yeah, you're in Matthew's shoes. He's like the protagonist, even though you can play as everybody. It's told through his eyes, right? And, like, yeah, like Shulk and Rex and A are privy to information he doesn't have, and they do kind of, like, talk over him. But he doesn't care, so, like, you don't really he doesn't ask what they're talking about. So you just kind of have to put the pieces together yourself if you're interested.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of do your own research, but not, like, I don't even want to say, like, in a bad way, right?
No,
like,
no.
it's more, there's a lot of stuff that is, well, I guess kind of in a bad way. The way I would describe it is more, it is content that you will get more out of if you are familiar with the, like, overarching themes of the whole series. But, like, there are elements of it that feel necessary, like, not super necessary because you still have N as something to cling on to from the base game. But, like, the moment that you get into the final boss arena, if you've not written your dissertation on Xenoblade Chronicles, like, I don't think I would have, I, like, refreshed myself on the stories before going into this. And had I not done that, would not have known what the fuck was happening. Because, like, I recognize the character as being, like, somebody from Xenoblade Chronicles 1, but then he turns into fucking Taboo from Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And I'm like, what's happening right now?
Yeah, I don't... Because, like, I played this... We started it when it came out, and played most of it, and then just, like, got caught up in the podcast, and then finished it for this episode. So I'm a little fuzzy on the parts of the story, and I restarted it a couple days ago to capture footage. So in the middle parts, I'm a bit hazy on, but, like, I was doing the art for the episode. I started it yesterday, and I was looking up symbols for Xenoblade, as I do. And I was reminded that the Trinity processor is a thing. Which is, like, when, like, basically in fucking regular ass Earth, in the future, there's, like, a space station with these scientists performing, like, some kind of particle acceleration or something experiments, and then
Essentially,
like the computer on the space station has this thing called the Trinity processor, which has these 3 crystals in it, and I was like, oh yeah, this was a thing. And, like, the green one is, like, Pyramithra, the red one is Alvis, and then the purple one is Malos, as far as I remember. And I know the green one is accounted for with Glimmer in this game, and the red one with Alvis and A. But the purple one isn't there. So I was like, is that what corrupted Alvis? Is he, like, merged with Malos? And, like, he was, like... That was my theory.
Or it's, like, unbalanced because the Malos entity isn't there.
Right, yeah, something like that. Because I was like, why did Alvis turn evil? And I never got, like, an answer for that. Because he seems he seems like pretty cool and, like, down to just let people do whatever they want in the first one. So yeah, my theory was that Malos had something to do with
that. Seems
it.
like it makes enough sense for me to be like, yeah. 100%.
And I think it wants a little bit of that. For you to, like, fill in some of the gaps yourself. So That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think, and I mean, we have dabbled on occasion in terms of like full sort of like narrative analysis. And by when I say dabbled, I mean we've never done that.
Not to like in an academic sense.
Yeah. And so it's difficult for me to sort of like, I don't come in here completely unscripted without doing research and have the expertise to be able to really piece this together. But it gives a sense in the DLC of like, I mean, I guess this is kind of a common theme across Xenoblade, the franchise, where everything you do in the game feels so almost comically inconsequential compared to what like the main narrative is. And if you're a player like me, you spend 20% of the game on the main narrative, and then 80% is everything else. So it was a little bit jarring on occasion, especially we'll talk about the ending at some point, I'm sure. But at that point, me coming in and just being like, okay, I just got done like farming fish for some side quest. And now I'm being asked to kill God again.
Right.
So it felt like there was sort of it wasn't necessarily a disconnect because it's sort of a narrative issue that's present across like any long game, but it was more of I felt like there was an urgency to the plot that was unable to be fulfilled, at least by me.
Yeah. I feel that way about most RPGs. So I think it is kind of a problem of like the open world or very long RPG kind of genre.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, like the quests, like it almost always seems like they're like should be time sensitive, but then it's like go spend 50 hours doing whatever, and then come back to this whenever you feel like. Yeah.
I mean, I do like the freedom. I will say that.
But yeah, no, I mean it does stand out. You're not wrong.
Yeah. I want to ask a rhetorical question. So, I don't know if you need to do any like vocal warm ups or anything to prepare to say the word yes. But would you believe that I spent like that? This game is fairly short compared to the main game, and that I spent like 38 hours on it.
No, not at all.
Okay.
It actually,
so no, you wouldn't.
I thought you were going to say a higher number.
Well, yeah, it could have been. I actually did cap myself, unlike on other Xenoblade games.
Yeah, I feel like it makes sense, like because like I feel like these like the Xenoblade expansions are tighter designed because like they're a little bit more linear. The map's not as big, so I think it's a lot easier to do all the side content. At least it for someone like me, anyway. So like I probably put in about that much time too. So yeah, I think it like, and this is something I think like game designers, if any of you ever listen to this, odds are low. But
we have evidence of at least like
that's
2 to 3 designers having heard our podcast.
That is true. But like, I think like a smaller, denser game, like I hope games go in that direction. Like instead of a game with a map as big as Breath of the Wild, how about we make it like 1/3 that size with like 3 times as much content? So
yeah.
So I think like the tighter denserness, I think makes it it's like a shorter experience, but it feels just as like fulfilling, and it's I think easier to do everything. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I realize that I say this like after we sort of started off on a thing. I didn't mean to necessarily like change the subject so much as talk about how you sent me a text message one day and was like, the last boss or like one of the last bosses of this game is actually pretty hard. And I was so highly over leveled for it that they all crumbled beneath my feet with no effort.
Yeah, I was talking about
that
N.
is I after beating the final boss, I was like, definitely he meant N.
Yeah, I was probably my leave of absence from the expansion. Like I had to relearn how to play on him, basically. So like I probably fought him like 18 times before I beat him.
Damn.
And I was like 10 levels higher than him at least.
I will say when I started, because I started the game in the base game, doing like challenge missions, like the whatever things to learn the combat system. When you don't know what's going on, it feels like you aren't doing anything, which is definitely a complicated issue. And then the game's changes in the mechanics kind of exacerbate that. So yeah, we will talk about that. But like, as you were saying, like the fact that there's never a time limit. There's never, the urgency is never really followed through on. I had walked up to probably one step before triggering the cutscene that would have ended the game, and then just like about faced and turned around and went and like finished the Collectopedia. Like, there was such a lack of urgency to me that even when like the big climax moment came, I was more excited about potentially finishing out the affinity knobs than I was actually completing the game.
Yeah, and it might be kind of like the like the self-referential like retreading of story beats, right? Like you're going to fight Alvis again,
right?
You know, like so this is stuff you've already done, and you're going to see the cutscene of like Klaus creating the separate universes again, and you know like we've done this song and dance a few times with Xenoblade already, so that probably contributes to it
for sure.
It was cool to like go to the real world though for a minute.
I agree. We did this once before, right? Isn't there like
in
one?
Xenoblade?
Yeah, it's either like the very end of 1 or 2, and I can't remember. It's like they take all of your party members away from you.
In the first game, you go to space and you approach Earth.
Oh, that's true, but that isn't it. I do remember
and in
that.
2, I think you go to Elysium, but I don't think you visit the real world.
Okay,
like
I'm just remembering like a scene
hill,
where you walk around.
Yeah, like the hill we're overlooking the town, like that you see at the beginning, under the tree. Yeah, you go there, but I don't think you go to the real world.
I don't know. I just remember a part near the end of a game where you walk around and you fight the other party members, and it's like in a ruined city. And I'm gonna laugh really hard if it turns out this is just like a different game.
I think it is. But I think that sounds familiar to me too, but I can't place what it is.
Well, let us know in the comments what game I'm actually thinking about. But if this is the first time we went to the real world, then hell yeah, I love that. Big fan of it. I don't know. I think what we're talking about now, I think a lot of the exciting plot stuff that happens in the game happens at like the very end, and I feel like we would be doing a disservice to the structure of our podcast to just immediately jump to it.
Yeah.
So
you switch gears.
Yeah, let's back it up. Let's talk about sort of the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I mean like, what is the player experience going into this? Especially for you coming right off of the main game. I mean, not right off, but you definitely had a shorter gap between when you finished it and when you started it than I did. Because they do change the mechanics of the game a little bit in the moment to moment, but in the grand scope, actually kind of a lot. And I don't know if because I never really settled into it quite as well.
I settled into it pretty well, I think. Because I played the DLC for all of these games, and I know like they always change it up at least a little bit. I think maybe the first game's DLC changes it the least, but so I was prepared for it to be subtly different. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like they started off simple enough, and I I feel like, how do I want to say it? Like, I like that I'm kind of torn on how I feel about it, but like the fact that you have to like unlock all your slots.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a way to like keep the player from getting too overpowered too quickly. It's my guess. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And like the fact you can like level up your weapons and stuff. But yeah, like overall, I didn't really have strong opinions on it. It's more or less exactly what I was expecting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think that I was expecting it to be a little bit different, and I think I was hoping for it to be different in not the ways that it ended up being different. Like from a grand scale, I am okay with the idea of putting level ups, which is essentially what the affinity system is, behind exploration. I am less okay with the amount of it that you have to do in order to like get stuff into the third tiers of people's affinity charts. Like, obviously by the end of the game, mine were completely filled out except for Shulk, because I didn't fight. I literally left 3 things alive in the game that would have finished me out to 100%, but I wasn't about to power level the DLC, because that sounds literally like the most miserable thing in the world to finish all of the unique monster fights. But there were like a lot of times where I was just like, should I spread out my upgrades in such a way that's like keeping everybody relatively at the same level, or should I just go all in on a character and like have one character that's very strong over top of everybody else? And I don't, it's not that I don't like the having to make that decision. It's more like, you know that you're going to be able to get everything up. It's just going to take more time. And I would rather have a middle ground where everyone is just leveling normally.
Yeah.
And you have the power scaling on like a more even curve.
Yeah, it feels like it was balanced around like people who were like the diehard Xenoblade fans. Like it feels like it's there to like limit them in the early game, and like they have to like just do all the content like they were gonna do anyway to like get everything up to the top level. Yeah, and so if you're like in the middle, like someone like me, yeah, it is unfriendly to those types of players, I guess. Because yeah, my stuff was like, even though I put a lot of time in, like I did not have everything unlocked.
Right. Yeah, and some of them are hidden pretty well, I'll say. There's a lot of sort of, shit radar functions in the game.
I didn't
like,
even bother with that thing.
Yeah.
Upgrading it, like...
Yeah, there's an upgrade you can get for that just makes the game beep at you 24 hours a day. All the time, because there's just always something near you until you like clear out a whole area. So there's just like a lot of droning and beeping. A lot of times stuff that you can't even get to, and that's why you don't have it, because you have to like get there from another area, and it's like, please just shut up while I can't get to it. So yeah, it was an experience for sure. And not only that, but you can also build the like ones that put markers all over your map. There's like a lot of ways to make the exploration very easy to do, which I think it almost to me it makes it feel more like a chore in order to bring your character sort of up to the level of the content than it is like a fun way of incentivizing exploration. But this is also potentially, because one of the things that I like about doing these DLCs as an idea, which we never get to do, is I actually got to take my own advice for maybe the first time ever. Normally I just say things and hope that other people do them.
Yeah,
and I don't
do as
have
I
to.
say, not as I do.
Exactly. And didn't use the level up system at all.
Yeah, I didn't until I got stuck on N.
Right, that's when you do it.
Yeah. And then it still didn't help. So I think I was just forgetting a mechanic. Or I don't really remember what it was, but
Yeah. There's a lot that happens there. And I feel like a lot that could be easy to forget, especially considering the base game is probably overriding the knowledge from the DLC.
It's like remembering how chain attacks work, et cetera, and the fusion moves and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, oh my god. You're saying these things, and they're things that I had, like, in the ensuing 1 week since I played this game, I have forgotten already.
Mm-hmm.
This game introduces... So, chain attacks are back, unfortunately, from the main game. The worst mechanical decision of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is make most battles be... like 5% actual combat, 95% cutscene where you just look at a menu.
Yeah. It does, like, it takes self-restraint, but, like, I oftentimes just don't trigger the chain attack. If it's, like, a regular fight, Yeah,
in regular fights you can just ignore it, but technically speaking it isn't optimal in the sense that, like, you aren't getting the bonus experience. But it is... it's viable to not use it in the earlier parts of the, or like not even the earlier parts, but like in regular fights. But yeah, in boss fights, almost always have to come down to a chain attack, sometimes multiple.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So it is like that. There's that as a problem, but then it also introduces sort of like the way that. There's only 6 characters, like you only quotes. As opposed to the main game having like a million classes that you could swap between. Mm-hmm. Your lineup is always the same, which means that your anything that you make changes to, like you can change the fusion arts, but like I will tell you right now, I spent like 200 hours in the first Xenoblade fiddling with armor pieces and gems and shit. I will never just try all of the combinations of arts possible and see how they're different, because I just do not have the brain to be able to figure out how they're different at all.
Yeah, and like you could pair up different characters for like the fusion, like chain attack things, whatever those are called, and I never did that either.
Yep.
I thought like I should try it out, but then I was just like, I feel like the combinations of characters they set up feel appropriate, and I would just leave them as it is.
Yeah, that's kind of accurate, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Like I did want to like see what like Shulk and Rex probably have some kind of cheeky thing if you put them together, or etc. But like I was like, eh.
Well, I think like a lot of the problems that I have with the way that this is presented, like in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, the game, you have the characters that are paired are thus because they have they're drift compatible.
Yeah, and they're like romantic interests as well.
Yeah, so there's like there's an in-game reason, both from like an emotional and physiological perspective, why those characters pair and create the Ouroboros. In this game, or in this, obviously there's nothing like that, because, well, I mean, there is, but like the game doesn't give a shit about it anymore. So you now have the opportunity to sort of swap them back and forth, but they all just like, it's all mechanically presented, essentially. It's like, I don't feel like I put Shulk and fucking Matthew together or whatever because of some narrative thing that I felt like they would have. It's just like, oh, I did it because I liked this bonus that they have and this special ability that you get when you use the fusion, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's boring, Andy.
Yeah.
I want it to have like a thematic reason.
Yeah, like the main
it.
pairings do have that thematic thing, but then like they give you the ability to change them, and yeah, that kind of undermines it a little. But except for, I guess, Matthew and A don't really feel like they have much of an actual connection, but whatever.
Yeah, by the end of the game, it seems like he's very suspicious of her, and then the game just kind of goes like, she's like, just like, do what you want or whatever, and he's like, I'm just going to take your word for it. And then there's not very much conflict despite the fact that it's sort of set up in a way that it might pose some conflict.
Right, yeah. She, like, much like Alvis before her, she's got even more, I would say, like a HAL 9000 energy. Like, she could have betrayed the party, but she doesn't.
Yeah, I was actually very kind of... I mean, I still am confused a bit by A's character.
Yeah, me too. I don't really get why she exists. Like, I guess if we go back to the computer analogy, I guess my headcanon was she was some kind of, like, failsafe, like, backdoor protocol for, like, if Alvis goes rogue, A splits off and becomes, like, a thing that opposes it or something. I don't know. That's the best I can headcanon.
Yeah, because they mentioned something about... in the cutscene where I had no fucking idea what they were talking about.
I wish I remembered
so
what
take this
cutscene
with a grain of salt. It's the one right before that you fight... Help. What's her name? Niall?
Oh, yeah. Niall.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be like Nile, like Nile River because of Noah, etc. It's like a biblical theme.
Oh, okay. I was like, how are these related?
Yeah. Well, and then Matthew is also a biblical name, so like there's a whole thing with that. But anyway, continue.
There's some kind of discussion that they have in which A is like, she like who Alpha took her because of her emotions or whatever, and it's like needed some kind of like thing, and then she was like her, and like refers to Glimmer. And like somehow like the way that it was like it's like a ego situation where like one person, there's like two people representing the same being. So like Glimmer is like the representation of the Aegis in this world, and so Alpha and A are like two different parts of the same thing as well. But I could be wrong. In fact, there's like a 90% likelihood that I am wrong about that.
I guess.
But it just it muddied the waters of what her character was like about.
All the stuff with Niall was the fuzziest for me too. But yeah, maybe it is playing into that like two universes thing. Like A maybe comes from the Xenoblade 1 universe and Niall from the 2 universe or something. So they're like the same entity from each universe, like kind of coexisting in this new one or something.
Yeah, that could make sense. Because you do have to consider, unfortunately, that like everyone who exists in the Xenoblade 3 universe has to have like some origin point in one of the other two games, which is an amount of like metatextual gymnastics that you have to go through for every character. I mean, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you go, that's a cat. They're from Xenoblade 2.
Yeah.
Done. Don't have to worry about it anymore. But when it comes to a character like A, whose origins are like specifically the thing that you should be wondering about, I have no idea how to place it.
Yeah, and like Alvis has like those like god butterfly wings, like Zanza did, and Alpha's only got one. So like me, like you said, further asserting that she's like a part of Alvis.
That could make sense.
But
also, she has Shulk's foresight ability, and the sword that she uses is called the Monado.
Yeah, which the Monado is what gives you the foresight ability. So yeah, and it's like a combination between the Monado and like the Lucky 7 from 3. So it's kind of like a smaller, like more like katana-like design.
This is such a pointless thing to bring up, but I'm going to because you mentioned the Lucky 7. There's like a scene, I don't know if you got this, there's a scene that you can get with Riku.
Yeah, how old is Riku?
Evidently like hundreds of years.
I know they live longer than humans, but I didn't think they were one of those species that lived for hundreds of years.
I love, by the way, speaking of regrettable writing decisions on the part of the Xenoblade Chronicles team, in addition to making Nopon seemingly live indefinitely. I will say I like that they had to run with that one, and you don't see Shulk constantly tripping over his words, referring to humans as homs.
Oh,
that
yeah.
was just like dropped after the first game.
Yeah. I had actually completely
which I
forgotten
find
about
funny.
that. Yeah, if you replay the first one, you're like, oh man. I'm kind of glad that they dropped this in the future games, in the future Redeemed.
Yeah, in the future game, or in the future. What was the first DLC called? And by first, I mean like kind of second.
Oh god, I want to say it was Future Connected.
Future Connected,
Yeah.
yeah. And then Xenoblade 2 gets to be the odd one out with like Torna the Golden Country or some shit. Yeah. Which is the one that I've not played. So
It's pretty good.
Stay tuned. Maybe we'll do that one at some point.
It's got a cool mechanic where like you actually toss the sword or the weapon back and forth between the driver and the blade. And it has like different moves based on who's holding it. It's pretty cool.
That is pretty neat. This game doesn't do that. It in fact takes the what I thought was the very cool, my favorite part of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which was the class system, and does away with it entirely. And it makes sense, obviously, because like it's focused around these particular characters, and you slowly get your party together over the course of the first act. But I did miss the variety that the classes provided.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It is very much like part of the identity. Maybe not even part. Maybe just is the identity of the third game. But like I'm kind of glad they did something different. But yeah, I don't know. I don't feel super strongly about it. I wasn't surprised to not see it here.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily surprised. I'm a little sad considering that one of the things that they did in the DLC prior to this was add new character classes to the base game, that the character classes from the DLC are not transferable to the main game, like after you beat it, which seems like kind of a weird... I mean, maybe that's asking too much. Maybe that's a Super Smash Brothers player's perspective of being like, I just want all the stuff in one place.
Yeah.
But I found like Glimmer and A to be like more fun than most of the healers in the main game.
Yeah, Glimmer's a lot of fun to play. Like mechanically. Yeah, and I like A too, but not quite as much personally. But I was really bad at using her foresight thing. It was one of those things that always made me like, like hit a button like too early.
Yeah,
but it's a cool idea.
Yeah, that similar to Noah having the Lucky 7 in the main game. It though much less emphasized in my opinion. I felt like the foresight ability, because you could only use it once per round until you level it up to the maximum when you get to use it twice, but it lasts for less time. Don't take things away from me when I upgrade stuff. That's not how upgrades work in an RPG. But because you get to use it only once and maybe twice, it felt like whenever I was playing around with the other in the parts of the game that didn't matter as much, I would be, I'd play Glimmer or Matthew. Those were like my two favorite classes.
Yeah, Matthew's a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, Matthew's great, and I'm sad that he gets kind of overshadowed, mechanically speaking, by other characters, but I do really like the way that he plays. But then whenever a fight like felt like it got serious, I was like, well, I have to play as A so that the CPU doesn't just like randomly use the ability or not use the ability when we're all about to die. And then I would have to play as A because I don't have the coordination to be swapping back and forth, especially not often enough to prevent the computer from using the ability, but like with without my consent. So that was, I felt that I think was a bit of a misstep. Not a major thing, but it did make me feel like I was playing A more than I actually wanted to. And maybe I got kind of Stockholmed.
Yeah. Yeah. But like whenever things got serious, I always played as Matthew or Rex, because I guess I'm just most comfortable with the with the attack characters, the offensive ones.
Right.
But yeah, like, I always felt like, because like whenever I would lose, I feel like I would always like psychologically like blame the healer. But then if I played the healer and we lose, I'd be like, well, I don't want to be blaming myself.
Man,
So I would let the computer handle it.
As somebody who played Overwatch for like 6 years, man, I get that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
People really hate when you lose and you're the healer. They're like, this guy fucking sucks ass.
Yeah. I like to play Shulk too, but I'm like bad at managing the aggro, so
that isn't your fault. In fact, let's segue into...
I think Nickel's probably easier to hold it with, but anyway, yeah, you do your segue.
This is my segment that I call, hey, Monolith, what the fuck did you do to Rex? Because he's amped out of his goddamn mind at all times. You can't hold aggro as a tank at all, because Rex always has aggro. The only time Rex does not have aggro is when he is dead.
Yeah, for me, it was Matthew that held it more. But it might be because I think Rex kind of got shafted on all the upgrade stuff because you get him last. Like, I think his like weapon just wasn't as leveled up as high, so that might have been the difference. But yeah, like Matthew can do like especially if you're doing like mostly fusion stuff, like if you're waiting for those to charge up, he can do like stupid damage and just take aggro from the tanks. But yeah, Rex can do it too. Yeah.
Yeah, Matthew's design, I think, is really cool because like his I think starting at the second level, though I think there's like an initial skill or whatever in his affinity chart, whatever you want to call it, has this emphasis on sort of like canceling and also making his
the uppercut move.
The uppercut move. What am I thinking of though? Auto attacks. That's the word. His auto attacks are like faster based on the skills that he has. Which is why I liked playing Fiora in Donkey Kong Country 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Because she she did more damage with the auto attack, so there was like this different sort of flow to it. And I really like that about Matthew, and that's why I liked Matthew as a character to play as. Rex, and it's not... I think it's legitimately just like the fault of... They did a character that's based around getting critical hits, which for some reason, no matter how much you try and make it bad in an RPG, it's always going to be way too good.
Yeah.
And his, what do you call it? The double spinning edge, I think.
It is exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, they're all named after attacks from the games that they were originally in. It charges on getting a crit. And so when I played Rex had like an 80% crit chance. And so when you use the attack, it would immediately recharge, and you just do it over and over again. And it would just fucking steamroll everything.
Show them a thing or three?
Yeah, you show them one thing 3 million times, and then they die. And so does Rex because he takes aggro all the time. Whenever I would try to play as Nickel or Shulk, I would just be constantly not being targeted.
Yeah.
So it felt a little unbalanced. The part of the game before Shulk and Rex join your party, I think actually feels better than the later part, because then it becomes more chaotic and the tanks aren't really ever doing their job, and it's weird. It's like it doesn't feel like it's as much of a team effort.
Yeah. And I think like if the game wasn't an expansion and could just be longer, they probably would have given you Matthew A, Nickel, and Glimmer, and had you play as just them for like a while before you got Shulk and Rex.
Yeah, it does. It gets to...
You get Glimmer and Shulk at the same time.
Right.
If I remember correctly.
Which is really annoying, because like I don't know why they stuck you with 3 party members for so long and just had this like extended period of Glimmer running away.
Yeah,
and like in the...
I was just going to say, upon replaying it, I was like, well, I don't want to like do all this content like in this open world area, you know, after you come up the lift with just 3 of the party members. Like I want to wait to get Glimmer and then I'll come back and do this stuff. and then you just have to keep chasing her, and you're like, well, okay, maybe that was the wrong decision.
Yeah. Yeah, Jesus. The very early parts, like on the plateau zone.
Yeah.
If you choose to, and of course I did, do all of the shit that is there, you will be there for hours, and one of the party members is just fucking gone. And it's crazy because, like, geographically, the whole time she's like maybe like a half mile up the road. But you're just out here doing, I gotta help this Nelpon build a dungeon quest. Right. And which nothing comes of, which is tragic. That would have been a cool side quest.
I thought that was referencing something from the main game. Because he was like, you had to I had to collect all this stuff to make this dungeon, and then they're like, oh, how long is it going to take for you to like build it? And he's like, hundreds of years. So right. I was like, is this referencing something from the main game that I'm forgetting?
Maybe it's a dungeon in the main game.
Yeah, that's what I was like assuming it was like getting at, but I have no clue.
Oh, in that case, it probably is, and I sound stupid. But either way, that side quest happens.
What a fucking idiot.
And it takes you, like, you know, however long, and you do all the other stuff in the meantime. Meanwhile, you just kind of have to progress to that point and then come back. It feels weird as somebody who does like to do things as you go through it. It's really tough to sort of manage that while knowing that there is another character that I could be playing as.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like we just talked about everything in the most fragmented way imaginable.
Yeah. I mean, I have a few more like character and story related things. And I'm sure mechanical things will pop back up in there.
Yeah, for sure. And also there's some other things, some presentation things I want to talk about. I haven't complained enough about chain attacks yet, all that stuff, and we'll bridge that gap. In the future, we will future connect all of our points together into a grand finale after the break. Hell yeah. That was one of the clumsiest. Whatever the music I used for the mid-roll was just the X-Men. Welcome back. We were just talking about the theme to the 1990s cartoon, The X-Men, and how it bears a passing resemblance to one of the songs in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which I think is a good enough, even if it was off tape, jumping off point, to talk about the music in the game. So I don't know. I didn't go back and spend that much time in the main game to understand really, like, because I remember us talking about it and levying a criticism against the music in the third game as being not as good as the music in the previous two games. I really liked the music in the DLC, and I want to say that I liked it better than the music in the base game. But I don't remember how much of it is actually different.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to judge exactly. If I sound like I've changed my mind on Xenoblade Chronicles 3's music, it's because I guess I've just been either in a mood where I'm more forgiving or like more into the style, or it is changed and it's better. One of those two things is true.
Yeah. So like the music of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is good. The base game. Yeah. It's just a really high bar. I think one of my problems with it was there's this like very specific like flute motif, like the specific melody they play, and they use it in so many scenes. And that was one of the things about it I didn't like so much. It's really powerful. So I get why they wanted to use it a lot, but it really kind of like takes away from it because of how much they use it. So this game didn't have that. That scene, I think that song pops up once or twice. But yeah, used much more sparingly. And I do think, like, overall, I feel like the music was better in the DLC. But yeah, it's just a high bar. So, it is like, I think all of the soundtracks for all the Xenoblade games are some of the best in all video games. So,
yeah, and that's objectively true.
Yeah.
They rock a lot,
Literally.
and I love them. So yeah, I'm a big fan of music in the other games. I agree with your sentiment there. I just think, I don't know, for some reason I think the DLC just kind of like hit it, and I think you might be
the way
right.
it
Like, you
starts.
lose that power.
Yeah. Like the opening scene, because I just replayed it to capture some footage. Like it's doing like the classic Xenoblade, like camera zooms in through the whole world, and it's playing that combat music, and it's like a slight. It's like, it sounds similar to the main game's theme, but it's different. It's like more piano, like kind of like rock jazzy. Like, it's just like really cool, and it's like playing, and you're like, fuck yeah, this is Xenoblade right here. And it just gets you amped up right from the get go.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I think that there's just something really, it gives you, it puts that movement in you, for sure. But that's it. I don't want to call it anything in specific even. I just kind of want to say, like, I think the music, like, overall was a step up from the base game in the DLC, where it is different. The stuff that's the same is the same. But
Yeah. So I guess one thing, a big thing in my notes I wanted to pick your brain about is, we talked about this in the main game, how it is a self-referential story, right? It's taking the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2 and crashing them together. And we talked about how, like, we feel like it's kind of hard to do that type of storytelling, et cetera, et cetera. So this game just full on just gives us Shulk and Rex. It gives us the two protagonists from the first two games. And it gives us Colony 9 from the original game, and it gives us Prison Island at the end. You know, there's lots of callbacks, like all the stuff that you might have thought, if you made a list of stuff that was missing from the main game in terms of references, they put a lot of them in this. And I just wondered, like, what you thought about that. Like, did you kind of roll your eyes at the Rex and Shulk being in the game, or did it work for you? So, like, did the self-referential continuation, I was just wondering how it hit you in this DLC.
I think, yeah. And I don't remember how much of this we talked about on the original podcast episode. And if we did talk about it, then I'm probably going to rehash a couple of my points.
It's all good.
And I'm, of course, going to bring up Dark Souls 3. But, like, my perennial least favorite version of this, where for some reason, I don't know why it is, but I feel like the existence of that game hinges so much on the existence of Dark Souls 1 that it takes away from what makes it unique. And it did interesting things, but if you look at Xenoblade Chronicles, it kind of did the same stuff, like the melding of different worlds together into, like, an alien landscape, and calling back to areas and people and things across the games are both present here. But I feel like and I'm going to say this is a bit of a difference. I think even more so in the DLC, I think that they have much more purpose than, well, I'm going to say than in Dark Souls 3, but I mean this generally. Normally when there's a callback in something, you can easily sort of ignore it. I feel like in Xenoblade, there's more of a reason for that stuff to be there, and it works because the plot is actually focusing on it to an extent. And, like, yeah, Dark Souls 3 it also focuses on it in the sense that, like, it's what the game is, like, about. But it's not like you go into an area, like, you don't have a guy from Dark Souls 1, like Solaire, show up and be like, hey, I'm familiar with this area, et cetera, here's the shit that happened. In Xenoblade, you do have that. And especially in a game that is as dialogue and cutscene heavy as a Xenoblade game is, I think that it ends up working a little bit better. There are definitely some things that are just in there to be like, nudge, nudge. Like, the last super boss in this game is essentially a version of the last super boss in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and he's in the same spot on that mountain Like it's just exactly the same thing. I think the conditions for his spawning is also the same as well. So it's like some of these things I think are in there as not necessarily fan service, but just sort of like as an additional sort of like tag callback to the original games. But I think that like Shulkin Rex in specific, I think was actually a really good decision. Even though I have other things to say about Shulkin Rex that I'm less or more favorable on. I think that conceptually it works out well.
Yeah, no, I agree with most of that. I think in Dark Souls 3, I think, it's the difference, I think it's the style of storytelling. Because, like, I think probably actually, if you laid out Dark Souls 3 and the themes and the story, it's actually, like, probably pretty well done. But because it's harder to engage with, because it's that, like, cryptic style of storytelling, what a lot of people take away from it, from the experience of, like, actually playing it and not digging through all the descriptions, is just, like, remember Dark Souls 1? You know, I think it kind of comes across that way.
You remember Anne Orlando?
Yeah, exactly. But in this game, like, it's like there's more of a direct story, and like you can kind of like they can express like what the point is of them doing these things, and it lands better because it just like you get what's going on explicitly.
I will say it gives rise to my least favorite writing trope in these games, which is where they're like, oh, you call that the Urian Mountains, huh? And they're like, yeah, they're like mountains. And he's like, I once got eaten by that. And they're like, what? They're mountains. You can't be eaten by mountains. And he's like, oh. And then just doesn't elaborate.
Yeah.
Like, nobody ever just says anything
that
is readily apparent to them.
That feels like very JRPG to me. Because like I kept thinking the same thing. Like every scene that like Rex and Glimmer had together, I'm like, just tell her like about Pyra and Mithra, and he never does, unless it's buried in like an affinity scene or something.
It's not.
Yeah, he just like never brings it up. And like that, that's like frustrating. So I don't know if that's like a cultural difference or what. But like, that kind of stuff bothers me too.
Yeah. It's very strange. But that's kind of it. Like, for me, I think that, like, the thing that bothers me about it is the amount of, like, tiptoeing around all of the shit that they do. Especially when they get as, like, specific as having a meeting, like a fucking war room meeting where everybody's gathered around a big table talking about how Shulk and Rex are from two different worlds, and then the worlds got smashed together to create Ionius. And it's like, okay, but why are you so fucking coy about every other thing that you could be talking about?
It almost,
that's like the biggest negative.
Yeah, it almost feels like in like Kingdom Hearts, where they're like, oh, we have to protect the world order, like we can't let on where we're from, etc., etc. It almost feels like that. Like Shulk and Rex are like, we know like big picture, like what's happening in this like world, but we can't tell the people who are from it like to protect them or something. Like it has that kind of vibe to it. But then whenever it says that, so it does feel weird. Like it's like you're like they're talking to these people that they trust and they know. Like Shulk's never like, hey Nickel, you're like a clone of me or some shit. Like, you know, no one ever like brings that shit up. So yeah, it is weird.
There's a cutscene, and I don't think it's an affinity scene. I think it is like an actual mainline story cutscene. But you can correct me if you didn't see this.
I might just not remember,
or if you don't remember it. Where it, like, to me, somebody reading it from like the perspective of somebody who would see a thing and unpack meaning from it, somebody with a brain that is intaking this.
If I only had a brain.
If I only had one. Shulk and Rex are talking about Nickel and Glimmer unmistakably like they are their children. Like Shulk had himself birthed Nicole into the world. Like the way that he talks about it, he's like, oh, I think they say the line like, I never thought I would get a chance to see them grow up. And it's like, what are you talking about? And it's the fact that they never address this is infuriating in a way that I cannot describe. The end of the game, this is the part where we talk about the end of the game. They like Shulk and Rex are like, anyway, we're gonna leave, and like you're not gonna remember us or something. Like they say they're essentially like fucking leaving the Matrix
I
completely.
think what they mean is like we're gonna like sacrifice ourselves here, and like history won't remember it. Like I think the post game like cutscene, Glimmer and Nickel clearly still remember them.
True, yeah, but they like walk through a veil.
So it's
going
to
to
be like a thankless like sacrifice, essentially.
Right, and then like they touch them and transfer their life essence to them, so that they don't die at age 20. Which, in case you have forgotten, is like a main concept of the characters
isn't it age
in
10?
Xenoblade 3.
Well,
yeah, they like
accelerated
speed age
aging.
them to 10.
Yeah,
and then they live 10 years, and then they drop dead because they have bad clone bodies.
Right.
This game is. I've never said anything that I myself agree with more with my own self than on the original episode where I was like, they should have made this game bloodier, like with more blood, because the game's themes are so fucking dark.
Yeah.
And they do not treat them with that level of gravity. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. And it's weird to me that they have this moment at the end of the game, and then there's never any explanation for what it is. Like, why are Shulk and Rex there?
Mm-hmm.
A says some cryptic shit about it, and I feel like that if they're not gonna talk to the characters and give them context on what they're seeing or provide additional meaning to the world of Xenoblade 3, then at least give us like a concrete reason for them to even exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the crazy thing to me.
Yeah, I kind of agree and disagree with certain parts of that. I find certain, like, those lack of details kind of frustrating, but, like, I think of it kind of, like, as in, like, the good way. Like, the kind of way that, like, makes me keep thinking about the game after I've finished it, you know? Like an unanswered question can make you, like, grow fonder about a piece of media, I think. So it kind of hits on that level for me a little bit. But, like, yeah, I do think, like, they could have explained a few things, like at least one of those things a little bit. Like, yeah, like I assume Shulk and Rex got pulled into the timeline with the rest of their worlds. Why they're here now, though? Like, why this specific point in time? Because it seems like many cycles have already passed. So, like, why aren't they dead? Because they're not clones, like, they're not reproducing. But yeah, like, I assume, or at least my headcanon, I don't assume this. That conversation, I do remember it with Shulk and Rex, where they're talking about Glimmer and Nickel. It's like, it kind of feels like they discovered the cloning technology that's present in the world, and like Shulk cloned himself, and then Rex cloned Pyra and Mithra, essentially. Like, they intentionally like created those, so they are kind of like their kids or something. Like, that was kind of like what I was thinking. But yeah, like, that would have been nice to like have some kind of answer on, especially Glimmer. That drives me nuts.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know why it's easier to accept like a clone of Shulk. I don't know why, because I think because
Shulk's like a guy.
Yeah, well, but also like in Xenoblade 1, Shulk is like kind of like not supposed to exist, or is like a vessel for Zanza or something. So he already kind of feels like a clone himself. So they're just being another clone Shulk. Like, I don't know, easier for my brain to like wrap my head around. But like, there's just Glimmer over here. Like, you know, it's just like another Aegis like redesign of like Pyra Mithra running around. It's like, what's up with that? Like, I really wanted to know that, and it never gets explained.
Right. Yeah, you don't get it. I feel like there are definitely things. To me, it's like the context is what is lacking. It's the fact that this is a DLC to the original game, and it feels like rather than create this sort of like weird existential thing that's happening outside of the world of Ionius, which is hypothetically like now one world apart from the real world. Before there were 3 worlds, now there are only 2.
Right, I think
Because they smashed them together.
Yeah. This is unneeded hair splitting, but I feel like there was real Earth, then it created 2 universes, then those got smashed together into one universe, which is the Xenoblade 3 universe. So I think
is real Earth.
I think it
doesn't
ceases to
exist anymore.
I think so.
Oh, it's just gone.
I think so.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, there was like a whole thing, like everybody
but maybe
panicked
not,
on
because
the space
Xenoblade
station.
X, I think, takes place in like real world Earth universe.
Who knows? Honestly.
So yeah, I don't know. When we went to the
Yeah.
real world at the end of this game, I was like, "Is this going to be the Xenoblade X tie-in?" But then it
Oh,
wasn't.
that'd be great.
And then it wasn't.
You gotta watch the stars.
Mm-hmm.
Something moves up there.
I'm waiting for
and
that
that's your
Xenoblade
sign.
X sequel and/or remaster. But anyway,
Yeah. It'll come. I don't know if it'll come.
probably. But
But yeah, and then the game has a twist. Like the DLC has a twist in that you keep being shown this photograph of Noah and Mio
Look at
with a
this
child.
photograph. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they play the Nickelback song.
Yeah.
And every time they do, it makes me laugh. And and then from there, you have this like they want you to make the assumption that Matthew and Relay, what is her name? Fucking Niall, are the grandchildren of the protagonist from the main game,
Mm-hmm.
which tracks and makes sense because they keep showing you a photo of them.
Right. Well, I mean, like they are, but not the versions from the main game. They're from
Correct,
further back
yeah.
on the timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. So the game, I think, wants you to interpret it as taking place after the main game.
Yeah, at
which obviously
first.
is impossible.
Yeah.
Because they separated the worlds. And then at the end, they're like, surprise, actually, this is like 300 years in the past.
Yeah.
And and that adds to the confusion to some extent because I don't remember the narrative well enough of the third game to be like why, how is Melia still alive and Shulk and Rex are old 300 years ago, and like Nia, right? Like because
Right.
they are there,
Yeah.
actually them.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Hyantia live like forever, and I think so do Blades. So
I guess Nia is a blade.
yeah.
Forgot about that. That's like the twist of the second game.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I think I really liked the choice to make Matthew and Niall like the grandchildren of like N, like that version of Noah. Because
Right.
like there's like the whole section in like the middle-ish of the base game that's like this like not that long, like an hour-long cutscene that's like that backstory about how like they had the child and then like Mio like disappeared and then they had like Noah took his kid into the woods and was like, oh, like there was like this whole dramatic scene, and I feel like that was really like beaten into my memory, and it being like, oh, okay, like that kid is Gondor, who is like Matthew and Niall's grandfather, so it make N their great grandfather. I don't remember exactly, but like that you can like I think it's easy like enough to trace that and like understand what's happening, or at least it was for me.
Right.
But I played it closer in proximity to the main game.
That's true, yeah. I will say, I don't think it's necessarily... Because it's not like it's difficult to grasp the twist before, like, the reveal. Which I actually don't know if there even is, like, a proper reveal. Aside from, like, Matthew being like, my name's Matthew Van Dam. And you're like, oh, he's, like, the guy. Whatever. Which is fine. It's just, like, at some point you make the realization that, like, this is a different time than I thought it was at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's more just like, to me, it feels like there's a... Yeah, scratch that. I don't know. I don't have strong feelings about it, other than I found it strange that they chose to... Not that they chose to do it like that, because obviously the way that the main game ends, it can't take place after it.
Right.
But I guess like their choice to conceal it
Mm-hmm.
is what is strange to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was intentional. I mean, obviously it was intentional because it is that way. But yeah, I go back to like fucking 20 minutes ago or whatever. Like the reason I asked this to begin with about like what you thought about like the continuation of the self-referential story is like, as I remember, the reveal trailer is one of the scenes from the beginning of this game where it's like Rex and Shulk confronting Alvis, who's like got the Monado and he's got the big god wings, and it just like I was like the alarm bells are going off. I'm like, oh no, are they like plunging like full on into fan service here? You know. But I feel like they definitely obviously know what they're doing, and they pulled it off well. But like, yeah, it seems intentional that they did the misdirect. Like, I think they want you to like not know why Rex and Chalk are there. I think they want you to like not know where you are on the timeline, or like because like there's like the whole thing of the base game is like the time loop thing. Like the clones keep being reborn, and like they've played out like their lifetimes like thousands of times. So like I think they want you to go in with that confusion. And I don't know. I don't know if I'd say the game like the story like benefits from keeping you in the dark, but I don't think it hurts it.
That's fair. I mean, there is also like that is an element of just how Xenoblade stories are told. Mm-hmm. There's always like some element that they attempt to conceal from the player, always conceal from the characters. Like the main characters never get a full scope of what it is that's happening in the plot until the end. Mm-hmm. And 3 is arguably the most like direct with this because of the constant cutting to
Zed,
yeah, the Mobius leader man. And so yeah, I don't know, it was just kind of an interesting way of telling the story, but not unexpected. Yeah, like it definitely comes with the territory.
Yeah, so I guess one thing I thought was interesting the more I thought about their designs is Shulk has both a cape and a robot arm and long hair. And I was like, okay, well they went with the motif of making him like Dunban, who wears a cape and has a limp arm and has long hair. And then Rex has an eye patch like Zeke and has like a long coat kind of like Morag and uses 2 weapons. I thought that was interesting that they use like design motifs from the party members of their respective game in their designs. Like I thought that was really cool. It's subtle, and it took me a while to like pick up on it. So I thought that was interesting.
I could not, until you said it just now, remember the name of Zeke, like at all. He had just completely slipped my mind. And so whenever he talked about the eye patch, like there's a moment where he talks about it, I was like, fuck, who was that? Like I had a real moment of not being sure what that was in reference to. But yeah, I think it makes sense considering that like Xenoblade has always been the game that's like, what if we do the my friendship is my power and take it just so seriously that you can't help but like actually believe it.
Yeah. I think I compared it to Chrono Trigger and like Dragon Age, like when we were talking about like the original Xenoblade. Like it really like emphasizes the party as like a group of friends. And like the affinity system is kind of like a byproduct of that. So yeah, like I thought that was really cool to see, especially because it's not called attention to. Right.
Yeah, and it's great. I do also like that they did that with their designs. I always hesitate to levy an acting complaint. But for many reasons, a lot of that is because voice actors tend to be like the most thankless people in the industry,
and they're usually really talented.
Yeah, Rex, his voice sounds like he is struggling with every word to get it out. Like It's like I've never heard anybody yell quietly, but that is kind of like how I would describe how Rex's voice, like adult Rex, is.
God, I don't know if I agree with that, or I don't. Maybe I do. I don't know. I feel like it was a really the voice actor did, I think, an incredible job of like emulating the original Rex, but like as an adult. Like it felt spot on. I don't know if it's the same guy.
Right, that's what I was gonna.
This
This is like something that would take too long to cross-reference.
But like I bought it 100%. Like I'm like, that's what grown-up Rex would sound like.
And I was like, that's what grown-up Rex would sound like if he had a tracheotomy.
Oh yeah, no, it worked for me.
Yeah, I thought like Shulk sounds to me exactly.
Oh yeah,
the same.
because it's just the same guy. Yeah,
It's the same guy. And obviously, I think it's the same actress for Pyramithra and Glimmer.
Yeah, yep. And
yeah,
Albus is the same, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. So everybody sounds identical. And then Rex, being the one character who started as like a 13-year-old, had like the most aging to do and had to be changed. Mm-hmm. And I think that, I mean, obviously I don't think that like the acting itself was bad. I thought that the choice was of voice.
Mm-hmm. Choice of
was
voice.
not for me. Okay. Yeah.
I thought they nailed it. Like that just, and it felt like Rex to me. I don't know. Cause like, I feel like it's a big challenge. Cause like Rex is like very cartoonish. His voice actor is very like, style, voice acting. He's very like, over the top. He says all these corny things. So like, the idea of aging that character up, I think, is like an interesting challenge probably for the team. And for me, I thought they nailed it. Like, I really feels like the same character to me, but older.
Right. And it is definitely the heart, because like Shulk obviously is older, but Shulk as a character,
he was already
his
like 18.
Theme,
yeah,
and like the thing about his character is that he was more mature than the people that he hung out with for the most part, except for Dunban. But Dunban's like in his 30s, explicitly, like in the text of the game, and so it makes sense for Shulk to not really change that much as he ages, whereas Rex like is a child, and so he did have the most to change. I don't know, just didn't like him very much.
But, I mean,
I love
did
the part
you like
where
original Rex?
That's a good call out. I also don't like regular Rex, so maybe that could be the problem.
Yeah. You just don't like the character. So they did a great job. You felt the same
they
about
did a super good job. Really true to form, honestly. Yeah, that's how I feel now.
Mm-hmm.
I do. There's a scene in the DLC that I find really funny in retrospect where Glimmer gets knocked out. It's when like maybe the most excessive thing in the whole game, where they fuse two Ferronuses together. It's like, why is this like a thing that you had to study to do to make a big robot bigger? Like, couldn't you just make a bigger robot? Why did we have to like study the art of fusion to combine them? Whatever, it's not important at all. But there's you like fight him, and then it transitions into the second phase cutscene, where even though you won, you get your ass kicked in the cutscene, which Xenoblade does 100% of the time. There are no exceptions. And Glimmer is running away, and he shoots a giant laser beam at her, and Nickel jumps in front of the laser beam, and then the laser beam impacts, and Rex has jumped in front of Nickel with the two big swords, and like deflects the laser beam. And I was like, at the time, I was like, that's funny and inconsistent, because Nickel is a tank, and hypothetically, mechanically speaking, he's the one who should be taking the big hit for the healer and the attacker. It makes perfect sense. And then later I was like, no, it actually fits perfectly, because Nickel can never have aggro, because Rex constantly has aggro. That was the element of the character that I was like, they nailed it.
I also think it's cool that and it's like not an especially like clever thing, but like that both the swords he has are the half of it, and they're only half of the Aegis, each one, and then like Nia has like the spiritual like other halves of them in the main game. So I think that's kind of cool.
I don't know what you mean,
Like
but
the
I
swords,
agree.
like he has two, like both the Pyra and Mithra version of the swords from the
right.
but it's like cut in half. They're each like half a sword.
Oh, I didn't notice. They look like full swords to me.
They have like a symmetrical design, and it was like split right down the middle, and he's got like half the sword. Anyway.
Okay.
And then
Pretty
that's
cool,
also what Nia has, but they're like the ghostly spiritual swords.
Right.
So that's cool. But
Yeah, that's
the
good.
other thing I had on characters, and then we could talk about something else, is that I've heard, I noticed this with Matthew, but then I've also heard other people talk about it with A. Like Matthew, it very much just looks like the protagonist from Xenogears. He's got the same hair, and I think like also wears like a cropped shirt. Because like in the main game, in the city, there's all these statues of like the founders of the city or whatever. And one of them, people were like, "Oh, that looks like the protagonist of Xenogears," and now we know that's actually a statue of Matthew. And one of them looked kind of like Shulk, and we now know that that's Nickel. I think that's interesting, and people were saying A looks a lot like Cosmos, which is like the protagonist of Xenosaga. They have like the same
Right.
color palette, but I didn't pick up on that one. So people were like speculating, like, "Oh, is this like hinting at like they're gonna reboot both those series?" I think that's probably reading into it a little too much, but like it's possible.
It's very ambitious.
Yeah, they've been doing Xenoblade forever. Like I feel like they're due to shift to a new thing. So yeah, it's possible, but I thought that was interesting that like the two like main characters are just references to the past two series that they made. Further, like going on that theme of like referencing past stuff.
Right. Well, and there's like explicit reference to Xenogears and Xenosaga within the other games in the franchise as well. Like they're definitely are not like they're not shy about making those ties more explicit. Like Cosmos literally even is a character in Xenoblade 2.
Yep.
So there is like a lot of things going on. I don't necessarily know that I would say that it feels like they're going to reboot those franchises, mostly because maybe put out other games in them.
Yeah,
That's
or
very
yeah,
possible.
like make new ones.
Yeah, but like, man, those because like Xenosaga I think is more likely, or sorry, Xenogears I think is more likely because I feel like that is a series that feels like it didn't get like an actual shot at life.
Yeah. I could see them remaking it because it was apparently like from what I know about it, I've never played it. It was like super ambitious, and it was like in that golden age of Square Enix where they were throwing money around in the 90s. And like they made the first half of the game, and then the second disc they ran out of money, and like there were like entire dungeons where like you go into it, you play a little, and then the rest of it's just narrated in a cutscene. Like you just don't, because they just ran out of money, couldn't make the rest of the dungeon. So like it does. If they were gonna remake one of their games, like Xenogears seems like the one to do, because it kind of got shafted.
And it would be cool, like especially to see them take it on now. Like Xenosaga to me is like the fucking sins of our fathers of Monolith Soft. It was like, what if we made everything too big and too complicated? We haven't done an episode on Xenosaga, but like
I would like
I've
to.
played. Yeah, it's a possibility that
Interesting,
it'll come
interesting
up.
game for sure.
Yeah, but it just feels like it's the most excessive version of what Monolith Soft already likes to do, and so like it gets so far off the rails so quickly. And I can imagine them being like, we're going to remake it. And then everybody who actually likes the game should be like, don't do it. Because we don't want people to know how that game was. But that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah.
I do like that because I remember we specifically talked about the statues in the city and how it feels like things that I think it was in the context of people who only played 3 wouldn't know what the fuck was going on. And I like that in the DLC, even if you've only played 3 and the DLC, you won't know what the fuck is going on, maybe grand scale, but you would like have that connection. Like that's a through line that starts and ends within the same game.
Yeah.
Which is nice to have in a game that really doesn't often have it.
I guess random mechanical thing. I feel like the series has always toyed with giving you field skills, like things you can do in the environment that aren't just combat. And in this game, they give you the ability to like repair stuff. Like there are these like different like I don't remember what they call them, like zip line style things that you can repair.
Yeah.
And yeah, like in Xenoblade 2, they had like blade abilities and stuff. And I like the idea on paper. Like I really appreciate when RPGs have field skills and things like that, the stuff that you can do other than just fight stuff. And I like that they tried to tie in the collectibles with the repair system in this, but like I don't know, I feel like they've never quite nailed it. Like the blade system, like the blade abilities was cool, but like the requirements were often like stupidly specific, or you know, like once you got like a ways into the game, like you could just never do any of them without like having to go back and like retool some shit in the menu and blah blah blah.
Yeah. It was just too much menuing.
Yeah, so I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that sort of thing.
Well, first of all, this is definitely does place it squarely within the Strand type game
Of course.
of open world games, because it is there are a lot of systems, like you make zip lines and fucking sonar and ladders like in Death Stranding, which I thought was extremely funny. But I didn't think it to me it doesn't really add that much, because it's one of those things that like they tie it to a character. The positives are it gives the game something to do with its collectibles.
Yeah.
Of which there are 10,000 of, and most of which are kind of useless. And then it also ties it into a character's proclivities. This is Nicole specifically being a tinkerer allows you to repair these things in the environment, which works for giving him sort of a characterization.
Yeah, and also
but, like, and also Shulk, but that's like later, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ever, I assume that Shulk helps later, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, I know this is a thing we talked about in the original episode, is that like it seems like it was like a part of Shulk's character, that he was like a tinkerer and an engineer that they never did anything with.
So they did bring it back for him.
But anyway, continue.
Yeah, that is positive. But yeah, I'm never like super high on these things, because I know that it could have been done without this system.
Sure.
Like it didn't really need to be there. So I wasn't like excited about it, but it's way better than the blade system, because you spend less time in the menus, maybe thematically less cool. And also mostly required, like you have to do them to get stuff.
Yeah, it's more linear.
Yeah. So, yeah. I'm more positive on it than like other attempts that they've made at this, but honestly, I feel like they should just sort of streamline some of that stuff out. Similar to like cooking and shit. Like, why is that in the game? Why are there multiple quests centered around it? Like, it's kind of weird.
I don't know. I kind of like that as like it works better in the base game, because I feel like it's like a bonding activity for the group to do at the campsites. So like, it works like on a thematic level. But yeah, mechanically, it's not really adding like anything.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that's my main thrust. I feel like these games have always been centered around their characters more than they have any sort of like cohesion. I love these games. I would never call them focused. That's not how they are designed.
Yeah. They've got that like 90s RPG, like throw everything at the wall kind of energy.
Yeah, big time. And so it's like, it's hard to knock it, because it's like definitely part of the game's identity. But at the same time, it's like, after I've played this game for 50 hours, I'm never gonna cook a meal again.
Yeah, I always check because I'm me. I have to. But you always like, yeah, you like run out, unless you like specifically farm the ingredients, you just run out of the stuff to make anything. So you're just like always making like the more money, whatever curry.
Oh, the more money curry, of course. Yeah, I did find that to be a thing. Like, my thesis on this, and so just copy paste this whenever I go to do my final thoughts, is I really enjoyed this game. Like actually playing the DLC, like I had a good time with it. Almost every decision they made mechanically, I think, made it worse than playing the original. It's just very often it wasn't worse by a lot. It was just like worse by a little bit. So, for example, I don't really like running around picking up shit off the ground as like a mechanic in the game. It's not engaging to me. And so when I said I'm going to sit down and play the Xenoblade 3 DLC, I did not say, oh boy, I hope I get to craft all my gems again. But here we are. And like, I get it. Like, they wanted to have the same sort of escalation in the gem abilities, but it's tedious.
Yeah.
And you have to like go farm stuff. Like, rarely are you just going to get stuff on your way. And to me, that just like, that wasn't the call, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think they could have done other things to change that around.
Yeah, at least it's less tedious than crafting gems in the original.
God, yes, it is. You're correct.
Yeah, it is fun to have the original Ether Furnace, though, in Colony 9.
Yeah. I do wish that it... I mean, I don't wish anything to do with gems. I'm done with gems.
Jack, can you send me some gems?
I'm over gems unless they can be used to buy a sweet Eclipse Dragon.
Of course.
But I was wondering if, like, the Ether Furnace would do something different with the gems. Like, maybe we would have some sort of varietal on our hands.
Yeah.
But no such luck. That's all. Everything else that I could talk about in that is more just like, I think we've kind of already talked about.
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that they've kind of doubled down on chain attacks. I don't like the new fusion system. I don't like that every character has exactly 6 arts, and the only real change that you can do with it is changing which ones are fused when you do the Ouroboros power.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the fusion arts, but yeah, you do. I think my problem with them is that you feel obligated to use them.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I don't love that. Like always waiting for them to charge up and feeling only like there were only certain ones that I would ever like use as not a fusion art after the ability is unlocked. So
yeah, I felt like in the main game, I found that the fact that Kavis and Agnes had different like charge styles, and they're still like that in the DLC, gave sort of to me anyway, and I think to a lot of people, sort of a preference toward Agnes characters, because they charge with auto attacks rather than over time, and therefore were usually just up faster than the ones that took time. And I feel like they could have done something to smooth that in the DLC. And like statistically speaking, maybe they did do that. It did feel like the charge times were overall a little bit shorter than they were in the base game. But like that's another thing. Like I feel like they could have just change the numbers in like a barely perceptible way to make it so that the two schools of combat felt more in line with each other, but or not even in line, but just like more synergistic with each other, and they just kind of don't. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it felt like there were a lot of missed opportunities mechanically.
Yeah, it feels like they approached this game as its own like mini side game and less like an iteration of the base one.
Right.
Yeah, because I feel like the system works well enough for the length of game this is, but yeah, like it doesn't like take like the opportunity to like improve the base game really. And I think that's okay personally, but
I think it would be I think it would be more fine if it wasn't like a 30-hour game.
I guess.
I felt like I spent a lot of time dealing with the same problems that I had in the original.
Yeah.
Do we have redeemed thoughts?
My redeemed thoughts. Yeah, like I don't know. I feel like when they revealed this DLC, I think I alluded to this earlier. It had the cutscene of like Alvis and Shulk and Rex, and I was a little bit worried. Like I thought they were gonna go like full fan servicey, like remember Xenoblade 1 and 2, you know, like in a way that they hadn't in the main game. But that wasn't the case. I actually ended up liking this more than I expected to. I think they handled it really well. Yeah, the reintroduction of like something like Colony 9, I feel like that could have been so masturbatory and like lame. But I think like it was handled well. Like I think thematically they really had something here that they wanted to accomplish. I think they did it well. I think like mechanically, I think it didn't like the conversation we were just having. I feel like it didn't go above and beyond and try to like iterate and make the systems in the main game better. But I think for what was there, I liked. It felt a little experimental, like the way that you unlocked things. Like I feel like a lot of that maybe was in there for like the diehard fans who, you know, they wanted to nerf early on and then they knew would get all like super overpowered later, trying to like give them like a difficulty curve that was satisfying. But yeah, I think it worked well enough for me. Like I'm not the type of player that's going to go like completionist mode on this. So like maybe some of that stuff like landed a little bit better for me because I wasn't like grinding it into the dirt. Yeah, like I liked a lot of the character stuff that they did. Like I overall just really pleased with it. Like I think like the main game, I think I overall liked the referential story, but I think it kind of left me craving a little bit more of like something original, like maybe like they lean into this a little bit too much, et cetera, et cetera. But like I think this DLC really ties it all together. Like I think it really adds something to the base game. And I was really surprised by that. So I don't know. Yeah, I really liked this, and I feel like I don't know what the future of the Xenoblade series is gonna be, but I feel like for now this is a nice send off.
Yes. I think I most agree with the fact that this feels like a good cap on the Xenoblade like trilogy, because obviously X is separated in its own world. 1, 2, and 3 do feel like they sort of it does reach a culmination point in this game, especially considering how like sci-fi and weirdo a lot of the plot of these games are. I really liked the way that the climax of this game actually works. And ties things together in a way that, while difficult to understand in a lot of ways, which is keeping in theme with a lot of the things that Xenoblade has done in the past, is still like, it is cool, it is thematic, it's conceptual. I like that a lot. And I think it does it better than Xenoblade 3's base game story does. My big complaints with this are all just the fact that I felt like the mechanics feel less polished than in the base game, and the fact that they kept the chain attack system, which is like way over centralizing in the combat as opposed to the things that I think are more interesting. Like it is skill testing, and they even have like books and shit you can equip to like change what your characters do in chain attacks, which is cool. But it is it's like 90% of any difficult combat is sort of strategizing around just the one chain attack, which is a bit of a bummer. But otherwise, though, I also am really pleased. I think I had a very good time with this, complaints aside, and it was interesting to go back to after playing the original game, to see sort of like how they took new characters, because it was the third game's plot and the whole series' plot is a very character centric thing. It has these out there ideas and concepts for the worlds, but the stories themselves are extremely down to earth. They're about these characters and how they interact with each other. And probably the most surprising and pleasing thing about the DLC for me was the fact that they managed to come up with characters who I did care about. Being able to pull off that trick multiple times is really hard. Like in the main game, there are some that I care about less than others, but they still did a really good job and got the characters actually interacting. And so, yeah, I felt compelled to play the game a lot, not as much as the base game, but that's good because the content just isn't there for it. Overall, very happy with it. Yeah. Get at me. I don't know. I felt like there was like one thing left, but there's nothing. Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about The Outer Wilds, Echoes of the Eye. I had a moment of panic there. If you did not listen to the last upload that we put out, we ended Pocket at episode 100, and I forgot already within a week. So yeah, the last of our DLCs that we're talking about is going to be on the DLC to Outer Wilds, and that'll be next time. And then we'll have to make a decision that I'm now personally dreading because I know we talked about it and I forgot about what we talk about after that. So stay tuned. And until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com. There, you can find links to our Twitter account, our email address, the YouTube channel, the Discord server where you can talk about or suggest games for us to play, and you can listen to all of our old episodes, including ones that we did on fucking every Xenoblade game.
Yep. Except for X.
Except for X, and the one that we did on 2 was intentionally a really short episode.
Intentionally really short. Like an hour and 10 minutes.
AKA an hour long. We could right now, like at 10 p.m., talk about Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for 3 hours, I'm sure.
It's probably one of the ones that would inspire the most conversation.
Yeah, almost sure. And we even talked in that bonus episode that we were like, one day we might do a full episode on it. So we'll see what happens. Maybe could still happen. There's a lot of goings on in the Xenoblade world that we can still talk about. Fucking fuse, do a fusion attack with the subscribe and the bell.
Double spinning that subscribe button.
Look at all this duality that they packed in thematically. Comment the same thing 2 times, and then mash them together.
And then show them a thing or 3 in the comment section.
So regret. Oh no, he's gone, and he's gone. Oh, he's back.